In this video, we're going to render our data and filter it on the fly, meaning that as the search field changes, we will update what gets shown to the user. Now for the Notes application, we currently do not render this data at all. The data shown here is from a static set of paragraph tags, so we're going to fix that as well. The To-Do app does correctly render the real data. It's using the to-dos array. The problem is that it just does it once. We need a way to do this over and over again. When we want to do something multiple times, what do? We put it in a function, and we call that function multiple times. That's exactly what we're going to end up setting up. For all of our applications where we filter data, which is going to be all of them, we're going to set up a filters object to store the latest filters. So const filters equals, and we're going to set this up as an object, and on this object, I am going to set up a single property for the moment, search text. So for the moment, the only way we're going to be filtering or sorting is by that search text value. Now by default, we're going to have an empty value inside of there, and that value will change over time. So let's go ahead and actually create a way to render the data above, also taking into account filters down below. Now to do this, we're going to do a couple of things. First up, we're going to need to call this new function one time right away to make sure that data actually shows up. Then we're going to call this new function every single time this event handler fires. Right here, I'm going to create it. Const render notes. I'm going to set it up as a function. And this function is going to take two arguments. We're going to take notes, and we're going to take in the filters. Yes, I could just reference notes and filters from up above, but there is a chance I might want to call render notes with a different set of notes or an alternative set of filters, so I'll take them in as function arguments instead, making render notes just a bit more flexible. Now inside of render notes, the first thing we want to do is limit the notes to just those that pass our filters. So const filtered notes equals notes dot filter. We're going to call that array method. We're then going to set up our function, and we're going to get access to the individual note. Now remember, the goal inside of here is to figure out if that note's title contains the search text. So we want to return true when it does and false otherwise. I'm going to return. I'm going to check note dot title, and then I'm going to convert it to lowercase to make this a case insensitive search. Then we'll use includes, and this should all look familiar since we've done this before. What are we checking that it includes? We're checking if it includes whatever is in filters dot search text. And in this case, we also want to convert that to lowercase. So now we are successfully filtering our notes, and the next thing we're going to do is render them. Before we do though, we can make sure that this part works. Console.log filtered notes. Then down below, we're going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is just call render notes outside of any function. I'm going to call it right here. Render notes, passing in the latest data, notes, and the latest filters. This is going to make sure that the application initially renders something. Then we're going to re-render based off of user input by adding another call to that function inside of this event handler. When the search text value changes, we are going to update filters and call the function again. So that would be filters dot search text, setting it equal to. I'm going to set this equal to e dot target dot value. So I'm extracting the value from the input. I'm updating the filters object. Now all I need to do is call render notes again to render the latest notes. Currently, yes, it does not render anything, but we'll just make sure the log is working. Right here, I'm going to pass in the two things, our notes and our filters. So this should make sense by now. We have an initial rendering. We have a function call to re-render every single time the input changes. And right here, we have our filter. Let's make sure that filtered notes at least prints a changing amount of items based off of the text. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe this. What do we get? We get our 3 items. I can see them right here if I expand them. My next trip, habits to work on, office modification. I'm going to type next. And as I do, you can see I go from 3 items down to 1. Now the only item coming back is my next trip because it has next in the title. So we're successfully filtering our array items. From here, all we need to do is render them, and we're going to do just that down below. Let's remove the console.log and knock that out. The technique we're going to use here is pretty much identical to what we did in the to-do application, where you iterated over the array and rendered a new element for each one. So we're going to use the exact same approach. This time, though, we'll be iterating over the filtered notes array. So that is filtered notes dot for each. We're going to do something for each note right here. As the first argument, we get access to the note. What are we trying to do? We're going to create an element, set its text value, and render it. So first up, const note element equals document dot create element. We're making something brand new. And for the moment, we'll make a paragraph, though we'll switch that tag up later. Down below, we're going to set its text content. Note element dot text content equals, what are we setting it equal to? We're setting it equal to the note's title. That is note dot title. From here, what are we trying to do? We're trying to render it. So I'm going to use document dot query selector. That's going to allow us to access the body. Then what are we going to do? We'll use append child, as we explored before, to add something new to the end. What are we trying to add to the end? That is the note element. Now, if we actually save things over in the browser, we can see all three notes showing up. My next trip, habits to work on, and office modification. But there is a problem with this approach. Let's think about what's going to happen. We're calling render notes multiple times. Each time, we're just adding more notes onto the body of the document. That means if I filter, these notes, they're not going away. We're just going to be adding more stuff at the bottom. So if I type something like next, what do we get? We get a whole bunch of duplicate information. For each new change to the input, it tries to render the latest list of notes. This is not what we want. What we want is to completely delete all of the notes before we add the new ones. That's going to make sure we're only ever seeing the latest filtered notes. Let's think about how we're going to get that done. Inside of index.html, what we're going to start by doing is removing these paragraphs. These are the static notes that we're no longer going to use. It's our job to figure out how to wipe all the notes that have been added. Now, the notes that have been added are going to end up getting appended to the very bottom of the body. And that could be okay in some situations, but it's also going to make it hard to do a few things. For example, it's going to make it hard to move them somewhere else, like if we wanted to show them between our input and our button, and it's going to make it hard to remove them because I couldn't do something simple like wipe the entire body because the body contains a lot of things we don't want to wipe. So if I want to clear all of the notes and put them anywhere in my document, we need a different approach. This approach is going to introduce to us the most common HTML tag out there. That is the div tag. Right here, we're going to set up div. Div is not an empty element, and you can see that VSC automatically auto-completed it for us. So what we put inside of div is just other content. Div literally stands for content division. Its job is to divide things up on your web page. So in here, this is where we're going to end up rendering all of our notes. Now we want a way to target this div. I'm going to set up an ID to do that, and I will call this ID notes. Now we're going to be able to target this div, add all of the notes inside of there, and then easily clear everything by just clearing the content of this div. There is nothing in that div we would ever want to save, so we fixed both of the problems. We can now easily clear all the notes and we can put them anywhere. Let's go ahead and save this brand new HTML file with our div tag in place. Over here, the first thing I'm going to do is put the notes in the right place. So no longer are we going to use append child on body. We're going to select the div we just set up. By ID, notes. I save the file. Over in the browser, what do we see? We see that our notes are now showing up between the two things, which is correct. This is exactly where they're supposed to go. Now, if I change the filters, I do still get the issue with the duplicate notes. So let's go ahead and work on that now. What we're going to do is clear that div entirely when we actually add the new notes in. I'm going to do that right here. To clear an element, we use document.querySelector to find the element we're trying to clear. I'm trying to clear the element with an ID of notes, and then we use a property on that element called inner HTML. inner HTML, that is capital HTML, allows us to set the new HTML value, what goes inside of that element. And if we want to clear it, we just set it equal to an empty string. So this is going to wipe everything. Then we're going to add all of the new stuff in. So here we have our 3 notes. If I type in next, what happens? I just get my filtered note showing up. There are no more duplicates because for every keystroke, we make sure to re-render the list. So if I type something that's in multiple notes like O, I can see 2 notes stay. If I type F, it filters down to 1 because this is the only one where we have OF inside of Office. So using this strategy of putting the new notes inside of a div is going to allow us to better render our application and keep things nice and clean. So there we have it. We have a rendered list of our data, and as we filter it using that input, the data actually changes. Just to experiment, we could put some HTML inside of this string. For example, I could start it off with a p tag, capital test. If I do that, what's going to happen is that we're going to see test up at the top of the list, and there it shows up. So whatever HTML we put inside of here is what's going to get rendered. In this case, to clear it, empty string gets the job done. So we covered a lot in this video. In the next video, you're going to be doing something very similar for the notes application. But for now, what I want to do is actually recap what we did. The first thing we did is we set up a div. A div is a content divider, so it allows us to put some stuff inside. I could put a paragraph or an H1 inside of here. In this case, it doesn't really make sense to start it off with any values. We actually add those values later with JavaScript. And to simplify things, I could add it just on one line like this. Now we're able to target this div by ID, and this is going to allow us to do a couple of things. Over here, we've created a render notes function. The render notes function takes all of the notes and the filters, and it figures out which one matches the filters. So in this case, if the filter was next, it would just be one of the 3 notes from above. Then we clear the div, making sure to wipe all of the previously rendered notes, which are now out of date since they don't match the latest filters. And the last thing we do is add just the filtered notes in. We call this new function once right away to make sure that something shows up before the user interacts with the page, and we call it again when the user interacts with the page and actually changes the filter. So there we have it. That's going to be it for this video. We're going to continue on to the next one where you're going to set this up for the to-do application. I'm real excited to get to that, so let's go ahead and jump right in.